There's something uniquely terrifying about basements. Maybe it's the darkness, maybe it's the isolation, or maybe it's the fact that they exist beneath us, in a space where anything could be hiding, just below where we eat, sleep, and live our daily lives. Tonight I'm sharing 4 true stories from people who experienced something in their basements that they'll never forget. Stories that made them question what was really down there in the dark. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and whatever you do, don't go down to your basement alone after hearing these. This first story comes from Marcus, who was 26 when this happened. He'd just moved into his first house, a small 2-bedroom in Pennsylvania with an unfinished basement that he used mostly for storage and laundry. For the first 3 weeks, everything was normal. And the basement was like any other. Concrete floors, exposed beams, a single flickering light bulb that hung from the ceiling. Marcus didn't love going down there, but he didn't exactly hate it either. It was just a basement. That changed one Tuesday night. Marcus was upstairs watching TV when he heard it. A knocking sound. Not loud, but distinct. 3 knocks, then silence. 3 knocks, then silence. At first, he thought maybe it was the pipes. Old houses make noise, right? So he turned the TV volume up and tried to ignore it, but then it came again. Knock, knock. This time, Marcus grabbed his phone and muted the TV. The house went silent. He waited, holding his breath. And then, knock, knock, knock. It was definitely coming from the basement. Marcus stood up, every instinct telling him to just leave it alone. But he also knew he'd never sleep if he didn't check. He walked to the basement door, pressed his ear against it, and listened. Nothing. He opened the door. The stairwell was dark. He'd forgotten to leave the light on after doing laundry earlier. He reached for the switch and flicked it on. The basement lit up in that harsh yellow way that made every shadow look wrong. "Hello?" he called out, feeling ridiculous. Of course, there was no one down there. He walked down the creaking wooden stairs, each step making his pulse quicken. When he reached the bottom, he looked around. Everything looked normal. The washing machine sat silent in the corner. His boxes of old college textbooks were stacked against the wall. Nothing out of place. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Just the house settling. And he was about to head back upstairs when, knock, knock, knock. This time it was so close he physically jumped. The sound had come from directly behind him. He spun around. There was nothing there, just the concrete wall. But then he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A small door, barely 3 feet tall, built into the wall. It was painted the same color as the concrete, which is why he'd never noticed it. And it didn't have a handle, just a small metal latch. The knocking came again. Knock, 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 from behind that little door. Marcus's hands were shaking now. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to go back upstairs and call someone. But curiosity is a powerful thing. He knelt down in front of the small door and reached for the latch. It was cold to the touch. He could feel his heart hammering in his chest as he slowly pulled the latch up and pushed the door open. Inside was a crawl space, maybe 2 feet deep. The beam from his phone flashlight revealed nothing but dirt and darkness. No pipes, no animals, nothing that could explain the knocking. And then he saw it. Deep in the crawl space, almost at the very back, there was something carved into the wood beam. He had to lean in further to see it clearly. 3 tally marks, scratched deep into the wood. And below them, in shaky handwriting, "It knows you're here." Marcus pulled back so fast he hit his head on the top of the small door. He scrambled backward, slammed the door shut, and ran up the stairs without looking back. He didn't stop until he was in his car, parked on the street, hands gripping the steering wheel. He called the police. When they arrived and checked the basement, they found exactly what Marcus had seen. The crawl space, the message. But they also found something else. Deep in that crawl space, past where Marcus had shined his light, there were marks on the dirt floor, like something had been dragged recently. The police searched the entire basement, even brought in cadaver dogs. They never found anything. No explanation for the knocking, no explanation for the message, no explanation for the drag marks. Marcus moved out 2 days later. He never went back, not even to get his things. He paid someone else to pack up the house for him. And here's the part that still keeps him up at night. The week after he moved out, his former neighbor called him. She asked why he'd been knocking on her wall late at night. Marcus told her he didn't know what she was talking about. He hadn't lived there in a week. She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "But I heard someone knocking 3 times. Every night at 2 a.m. from the wall we share with your old basement." This story comes from a woman named Rachel, and it happened during college when she was renting a room in an old house with 3 other students. The house had been converted into apartments, and Rachel's room was on the first floor, right above the basement. She'd been told the basement was off limits. It belonged to the landlord and was used for storage. Fine by her. She had enough to worry about with midterms. But about a month into her lease, Rachel started hearing something strange. Late at night, usually around midnight, she'd hear humming coming from below her room. And it wasn't a melody she recognized, just a low, droning hum that would go on for hours. At first, she thought maybe the landlord was down there working on something, but when she mentioned it to her roommates, they looked at her like she was crazy. None of them heard anything. Rachel tried to ignore it. She wore earplugs, she played white noise, but she could still hear it, or maybe she could feel it, vibrating up through the floorboards. One night, around 1 a.m., Rachel couldn't take it anymore. The humming was louder than usual, and it was drilling into her skull. She grabbed her phone, threw on a hoodie, and decided to find out what was making that sound. The basement entrance was outside, around the side of the house. Rachel had never been down there before. The door was old and wooden, with a rusty padlock hanging from the latch. But when she pulled on it, the lock wasn't actually secured. It fell open in her hand. The door creaked as she pushed it open. A wave of cold, stale air hit her face. She shined her phone light down the concrete steps. "Hello? Is someone down here?" No answer. But the humming continued, louder now that she was closer. Rachel descended the stairs. The basement was exactly what you'd expect. Cluttered, dusty, filled with old furniture and boxes. But there was something off about it. The way the shadows fell. The way the air felt too thick, like it hadn't moved in years. And the humming. It was coming from the back corner. Rachel moved through the maze of old furniture, her light bouncing off surfaces, creating strange shapes that seemed to move at the edge of her vision. When she reached the back corner, she found the source, an old radio. It was sitting on a wooden crate, partially covered by a sheet. The dial was lit up, glowing faint green in the darkness, and from its speakers came that endless, droning hum. Rachel let out a shaky laugh. That's all it was. Just a radio someone had left on. She reached out to turn it off, and the humming stopped. Not because she'd touched it, she hadn't yet. The radio had stopped on its own. The glowing dial went dark. The basement fell into complete silence. Rachel stood there, hands still outstretched, not understanding what had just happened. And then, the humming started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from behind her. Rachel slowly turned around, her phone light trembling in her hand. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cluttered basement. But there was nothing there. Just furniture and boxes and shadows. The humming grew louder, closer. It felt like it was right behind her ear now, like someone was standing so close she could feel their breath. Rachel ran. She didn't care what she knocked over or what she tripped on. She ran up those stairs faster than she'd ever moved in her life, burst through the door, and didn't stop until she was back in her room with the door locked. She sat on her bed, shaking, telling herself it was just her imagination, just the stress of school and lack of sleep. But then she looked at her phone, at the timestamp on the video she'd accidentally started recording when she pulled it out. The video showed the basement, the radio, and just before she'd turned around, in the background, barely visible in the darkness, there was movement. A shape. About like someone had been standing in the corner the entire time, just beyond her flashlight's reach. watching her. Rachel moved out the next day. She told her landlord she had a family emergency. She didn't mention the basement. She didn't mention the video. And she definitely didn't mention that even now, years later, sometimes late at night. She can still hear that humming. This one comes from David, who experienced this when he was staying at his grandmother's house for the summer after graduating high school. His grandmother's house was old, built in the 1940s, and the basement had been finished at some point, converted into a small living space with wood paneling on the walls and old carpet on the floor. It even had a small bathroom and a couple of those narrow basement windows near the ceiling. David's grandmother told him he could sleep down there if he wanted more privacy than the upstairs guest room offered. She hadn't used the basement in years, she said, not since David's grandfather passed away. The first few nights were fine. The basement was quiet, cool, and private. Perfect for a college guy who wanted to stay up late gaming and sleeping in. But on the fourth night, something changed. David woke up around 3 a.m. He wasn't sure why. He just woke up. And he had the distinct feeling that something was wrong. He lay there in the darkness, listening. The house was silent. But then he heard it. A soft scraping sound, like fingernails on glass. It was coming from one of the basement windows. David sat up slowly, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. The window was about 6 feet off the ground, one of those small rectangular ones that you see in old basements. From his angle, he couldn't see anything through it, just darkness. The scraping came again, deliberate, slow. David grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, pointing it at the window. The beam lit up the glass, but he couldn't see anything outside, just the reflection of his own light. He got out of bed, his bare feet cold on the carpet, and walked toward the window. As he got closer, he realized something that made his stomach drop. That window. It was at ground level from the outside, which meant anyone standing out there would be looking down into the basement. And more importantly, the window was below ground level in the backyard. There shouldn't be any way to reach it from outside. It was buried behind a window well, and completely inaccessible unless someone dug down into the earth. The scraping came again. David stood beneath the window, looking up at it. He could see smudges on the glass now, like something had been pressed against it. And then, as he watched, a hand slowly appeared in the frame. Not outside, inside. A pale hand pressing against the glass from the inside of the window well, fingers splayed wide. But that was impossible. There was no space between the window and the earth outside. The window well was only a few inches deep, nothing could fit in there. And yet David could see it clearly. The hand pressing against the glass, those fingers spreading wider, and then a face appeared above the hand. It was pressed against the glass the same way, features flattened and distorted. Just staring down at David through that narrow basement window. Not moving, not blinking. David stumbled backward, his phone clattering to the floor. The room plunged into darkness. He could hear his own breathing, loud and panicked, and nothing else. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and pointed the light back at the window. Nothing. Just the dark glass and those same smudges. David didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat on the bed, lights on, waiting for morning. When his grandmother woke up, he asked her about the window, about whether anyone could access the window wells from outside. She got quiet for a long moment. Then she told him something he wished she hadn't. Years ago, before they'd finished the basement, she'd sometimes hear sounds coming from down there. And she'd always assumed it was animals, mice or raccoons getting into the window wells. But one day she'd gone outside to check, and she'd found something strange. Someone had been digging all around the window wells, like they were trying to make them deeper, trying to create a space big enough to climb down into. They never found out who did it. The digging stopped, and they installed better locks on the windows. Eventually, they just finished the basement and tried to forget about it. David left that same day. He told his grandmother he wasn't comfortable sleeping down there, and he spent the rest of the summer in the upstairs guest room. He never told her what he'd seen that night, but before he left for college, he went outside one morning and checked the window well himself. The earth around it had been freshly disturbed. It like someone, or something, had been digging there recently, and on the glass, clearly visible from outside, were handprints on both sides of the window. This last story comes from a father named Tom. It happened 3 years ago, and it's the reason his family doesn't live in that house anymore. Tom and his wife had just bought their first home, a foreclosure that needed some work but was in their budget. It had a partially finished basement that Tom planned to renovate into a playroom for their 2 kids. The basement had a main area that was carpeted and painted, but there was also a storage room in the back corner. It was nothing fancy, just a small windowless room with concrete walls and a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The door to this room was always kept closed. Tom started his renovation work on a Saturday morning. But he was downstairs ripping up old carpet when his daughter, Emma, who was 6 at the time, came down to see what he was doing. "Daddy, why is the light on in the little room?" she asked. Tom looked up. She was pointing at the storage room door. There was a gap at the bottom, and sure enough, light was spilling out from underneath. "I didn't turn that on," Tom said, but he figured maybe his wife had been down there earlier. He walked over and opened the door. The light was on. The bulb swung slightly, like it had just been disturbed. But the room was empty, just some old boxes and a water heater. Tom flicked the switch off, closed the door, and went back to work. 20 minutes later, Emma called out again. "Daddy, the light's on again." Tom turned around. She was right. Light was coming from under the door again. And annoyed now, thinking maybe the switch was faulty, Tom walked over and opened the door. The light was on. He flicked the switch off and made a mental note to replace it. This happened 3 more times that day. Each time, Tom would turn the light off. Each time, it would be back on within minutes. Finally, frustrated, Tom unscrewed the bulb completely and took it with him upstairs. Problem solved. That night, Tom was lying in bed when he heard Emma crying. He went to her room and found her sitting up, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "The light keeps waking me up," she sobbed. "What light?" Emma pointed at her bedroom floor. "The one downstairs. It keeps turning on and off, on and off. I can see it through the vent." Tom's blood went cold. Emma's bedroom was directly above the basement, and she had one of those old floor vents that let you see straight down into the room below. Tom knelt down and looked through the vent. The light in the storage room was on. The bulb he'd removed, the one that was currently sitting on his workbench upstairs. Tom ran downstairs. He unlocked the basement door, something they'd started doing at night for safety, and flew down the stairs. The storage room door was closed, but light was coming from beneath it. He threw the door open. The light was on. Not the overhead bulb, that was still missing, but the room was filled with light, bright and harsh, coming from nowhere. There was no source. It was just there, illuminating every corner of that small concrete room. And then, as Tom stood there trying to understand what he was seeing, the light began to dim. Slowly. I'd like someone was turning down a dial. The room grew darker and darker until it was completely black. Tom stood in the doorway, his hand still on the light switch, staring into the darkness. And then he heard it. A child's voice. Quiet, coming from inside the storage room. "Daddy?" It sounded exactly like Emma. Tom slammed the door shut and ran back upstairs. He checked Emma's room. She was there, asleep now, completely safe. He woke his wife and told her everything. They packed bags that night and stayed at a hotel. The next morning, Tom called a contractor friend and asked him to do some investigating while they were out of the house. What the contractor found made Tom's skin crawl. Behind the drywall in that storage room, there was a space, not just a gap, an actual hollow area about 3 feet deep, running the entire length of the back wall. It had been sealed up deliberately, covered over during a previous renovation. And inside that space, they found children's drawings. Dozens of them, all drawn in crayon on the concrete wall. Simple stick figures, a house, a family, and one drawing, larger than the others, of a little girl standing in a dark room. The only thing in color was a yellow circle above her head, a light. The contractor also found scratch marks on the inside of that sealed space. Small ones, like a child's fingernails. Tom and his family never went back to that house. They broke their lease, took the financial hit, and moved within the week. Tom hired someone to pack up their belongings. He never asked what else they might have found. The house sat empty for 2 years after that. Eventually, it was sold to another family, who lasted 6 months before they left too. The house is currently vacant. The real estate listing says it needs work, that it has historical charm and good bones. But if you look at the listing photos closely, you can see something strange in one of them.